Good morning, America. Hubert Johnson here with Taxes Made Easy. I was all set to talk about, some of the basics again. I had someone question, how many tax returns should be filed. This was a CPA, so I pulled the IRM and shot it off to him. But another issue reared its head just yesterday, and I think it's an important enough issue that we're going to make it the topic for today, and that's rental housing. Yesterday, President Biden announced in Nevada that his administration will push for rental caps. So we're going to talk about, is that a good idea? How can that really affect consumers for the better or worse? And again, this is something that's been tried and put into place in many areas. And we're going to take a deep dive into this when we come back. Welcome back, everybody, and thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy, either live or on rebroadcast. And again, this is interesting topic for the day, but we have some breaking news that we're going to talk about first. And this is very important, some very important stuff. And let me just grab this article. This is from Fox News, but this news is all over the place, and it's all the same. Democratic Senator Bob Menendez guilty on all charges in federal corruption trial. So the jury was in New Jersey, the prosecutor was in New Jersey. This is not, the DOJ here is the Biden administration. And this isn't the first time Bob Menendez has been prosecuted for corruption. Last time, it was there was a hung jury. Basically, the jury wouldn't convict for some reason, and so he survived that attempt and continued on. Basically, he's one of the most powerful Democrats in all of Congress. And to be fair, Bob Menendez is not the only one. This is on both sides of the aisle, and I applaud this that they actually took one of the most corrupt senators out. I wish we would actually get more serious about prosecuting corruption on both sides of the aisle. Republicans and Democrats are both guilty. Not everybody, but too many of them. So just some of the facts of the case, if you're not aware. Again, there were 16 counts against him, and his sentence could be sentenced to more than 200 years in prison, but again, he'll probably be in prison for the next 10 to 20 years. But his political career is essentially over. Thank goodness. And he still claims, I'm deeply disappointed in the decision. He never violated a public oath, and they had never been a foreign agent. Well, the facts tell a different story. So Bob Menendez and two other co-conspirators that were, or co-defendants that were also prosecuted and convicted. Chuck Schumer responded and said he needed to resign immediately. Senator Menendez isn't going to resign. He's appealing his conviction. And New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy called for him to resign. There have been Democrats calling for them to resign, namely Fetterman from Pennsylvania. He's been very, very critical of Senator Menendez. So again, just to detail a little bit of the facts here, there's lots of evidence that they are accepted extravagant gifts from foreign governments. Again, they found more than 100,000 worth of gold bars, hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash stuffed throughout their home. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, because this has been going on for many years. Again, prior to his previous thing. So Egypt and Qatar are the main countries that were bribing Senator Menendez. And do you think it really stops with Menendez? No. So again, his wife, Nadine, was heavily involved in this. There are pictures on other sites where they actually had the gold bars stamped with the seal from these foreign countries. And it's just, it's almost cartoonish how bad it was. I mean, we're talking high-end cars, you name it. And so it's just very, very corrupt, very slimy, sleazy. I don't have anything good to say about Senator Bob Menendez. I hope he goes away for a very long time and has no place in politics or in public life again. So, again, my hope is that they get serious about corruption and prosecute not only finish the prosecution of Bob Menendez through the appeal process, but continue to moving forward. So, rooting out corruption is our government unfortunately has a lot of corruption at the federal and state levels, and we do very little about it. Again, it's the level of corruption has gotten extreme in too many areas. So next article, sorry, that's my opinion. And this one goes back to the economy. I mentioned this the other day. U.S. corporate bankruptcy filings are surging, and it talks about the kinds of businesses that are leading, and this is not good. So we had 75 new corporate bankruptcy filings in June. The rate of filings is accelerating, which is right now the first months of 2024 is only beat or rivaled by the worst months of 2020 when things were out there worse. So through June, and this is what they did, they looked through June, that's the last time we had more bankruptcy filings than the current year so far. So they had 467, we're at 346. So bankruptcy has gone up, gone down. 2020, of course, COVID, really bad year, but we're on pace to beat COVID, the year that COVID hit. The last couple of years things went down. Now, inflation surging, prices going up all across the board. You have 327 last year at this time. Total was 635. And so far for the year, we're on pace to beat last year's, which is not a good thing. So kind of gives you an idea of how far back you have to go to address this. So again, these are consumer discretionary sector, which is, these are luxury things, restaurants, hotels, clothing retailers, and even media companies. I talked to someone yesterday who's closing down his business, and not all business closings end up in bankruptcy, but it's an art company. And one of the biggest problems for retailers, and this is very true, people can go into a brick and mortar store, like Macy's, shop around, see what they like, and then jump online and find the same thing online for much cheaper, because Amazon, while they have warehouses and stuff, they don't have the same number of employees, sales staff. They're not paying to rent a huge location in a mall, and they can usually undercut brick and mortar stores. And so, again, this particular case was an art dealer, art supply dealer, and they did custom framing, they do other things, but the worst part about it is that people would walk in the store, and he was telling me this yesterday, walk in the store, price it out, and then just go online and buy it cheaper. And so his sales have just steadily dropped over the last couple of years. Again, it's just, if we want to support small businesses, and I think it's a good thing when you have small businesses being supported, and I actually support the buy local ideas. If you want things local, if you want to support local jobs, don't just go to a big, and I buy stuff on Amazon too, but if you can buy the same thing in your local store, support your local businesses if you can, please. I think that absolutely helps. So kind of breaking down the number of bankruptcies, consumer discretion, 55, and this is through the last 6 months, 55, healthcare, 40, industrials, 40, information technology, and then it just goes down from there. So Red Box rentals, we know there's been a lot of issues with Red Lobster in March. Joanne, iconic fabrics and crafts retailer. If you don't know who that is, just ask your wife. My wife knows all about it. And then in a big move that's going to affect us locally here, but a lot of places through the West, Kroger is buying out Albertsons, which is huge news. I think there's going to be at least 10 stores, Safeway stores that will be affected right here in Tucson. 3 of them close to where I am. We shop there regularly. So, again, just be my concern as this business close and shutter due to the economic headwinds that we're going through. Things are probably going to get a little bit worse before they get better. So batten down the hatches, pay off debt, plan and budget, and that will help you weather this tough time. So speaking about tough times, Joe Biden came out with an announcement yesterday. Now, I haven't purposely tried to avoid the politics of it, but just to give you, if you're not familiar, I'm sure everybody's aware of what's been going on. Joe Biden's had a not good debate, to put it nicely, and in the first debate, so again raised a lot of alarm throughout Democrat circles, and he dipped in the polls, and then I did talk about the assassination attempt on former President Trump that happened over the weekend. Those two things have really changed the political calculus for Democrats. And so how do you have to do something bold, you have to do something bold and big to wrest the conversation away from Republicans to try to take away that air. But what does he come up with? Rental caps. So high housing prices is something that we've all been dealing with. We've all seen it's a very real thing across the country. Anybody that needs to rent, and this, again, the high demand for rentals means that a lot of homes that might typically be sold directly to consumers are being rented out because the rental prices are so high. And this is a national or nationwide phenomenon, but in the battleground state of Nevada, it's been particularly bad. So, and he unveiled this new program yesterday to cap rental costs nationwide. So he's trying to, assuage Democratic concerns about viability of the candidacy. And this is right in the middle of the Republican convention. So a lot of the news is talking about the Republican convention making a huge announcement like this in the middle of the Republican convention. I mean, this is not by accident. This was planned. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but this is the whole point, is to get attention, get news. But is this an actual good move to do nationwide rent controls? So I'm past time, so we're going to stop and I'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. I'm just going to finish up this article. Um, Again, you have a lot of voter anger, and this is not just in Nevada, it's across the country at high housing prices. They have soared since the pandemic and really have hurt the standing about voters. Biden's standing, people vote on the economy and kitchen table issues. And so, how to address that, how to make a big change here. They're proposing national rent control. And this is the stripping tax benefits from landlords who increase their tenants' rent more than 5% a year. So, this is the initial proposal. It would only apply to landlords who own more than 50 units, but that's about half of all rental properties. And it would exempt new construction, which is typical in rent controls. Um, And so again, the details of this have not been made public. That was just announced yesterday. So let's talk about rent control. Um, so the big concern here is, so Biden hinted at NATO, is that it can backfire and, like most government actions, cause more damage than good. Ronald Reagan famously said, the worst thing you can hear, or the scariest thing you can hear, is I'm from the government and I'm here to help. So the government, we're overspending like crazy, and here we're going to punish people that provide rental housing. And so, again, you have plenty of tenant advocates, scores of renters that would welcome this, thinking this will help. There's a lot of people here, though, that tenants need help, but again, there's many Democrats saying this is nuts. Experts on both sides of the aisle tend to argue that government limits on rent discourage new development, leading to more controls. So any kind of control, any kind of disincentive to rent, first of all, there's no way people would purchase more rental housing and going over that 50 unit limit. Second of all, what happens when you get the camel's nose under the tent? Very soon, and this has happened throughout there, when this is just the first step in national rent control, then it's going to move from there. The bigger issue is that we are short between 1.5 and 5 million units. It's probably closer to 5 million units. You have construction and labor costs already high. And a lot of people, and this is what's happened time and time and again, developers respond by putting their money elsewhere, but they don't have the government trying to control them. So, interesting quote, rent control has been about as disgraced as any economic policy in the toolkit. The idea that we'd be reviving and expanding it will ultimately make our housing supply problems worse, not better. And this is Jason Furman, who served as a top economist in the Obama administration. He's now a professor at Harvard. So he's a Democrat, he's an economics professor, and this is pretty damning here. So the White House plan is they're saying, look, we're just going to do the rent cap for 2 years. Again, we don't have any details, but this is what they're saying. It's only going to be for 2 years. Yeah, right. When was the last time a government tax was put into place or control that went away when it was supposed to? California's full of gas taxes that were supposed to sunset, go away, not be part of the long-term picture. So again, if you buy that, I've got a bridge to sell you in Alaska to Russia. And the Biden plan it's supposed to only be for 2 years, and it's supposed to tamp down costs while they have numerous policies to increase housing construction. However, we've already talked about those policies, and they've already been widely criticized. If the government is throwing money in and incentivizing new construction, we're just pouring more money into a situation where you already have people building. The private sector is already doing that. So all you're doing is creating more money, chasing the same supplies, and that creates more problems. Our supply issue is still a huge issue. I mentioned the other day, I was talking to someone that did shipping, and it's taking him 3 to 4 weeks longer to get his shipping to the United States on average. Why? Because we have Houthis in Yemen shooting at shipping, and we still haven't dealt with that problem. And so all the shipping companies are avoiding the Suez Canal, and they're going all the way around Africa to get to the Pacific coast, and it's affecting shipping globally. So instead of taking a strong stance and dealing with these issues affecting shipping, affecting what's happening in the world, we're just going to throw more money at problems, because that's what the government does best, is throw money at issues. Again, that only leads to more inflation and more expensive housing. So they're claiming, if it says they even recognize it would make little sense to make this move by itself, but if you look at the rental plus the money we're throwing at it, it's going to help in the long run, is what they're claiming. Personally, I think this is a very desperate move to buy votes from blue-collar workers that many are being attracted to the Trump campaign, and are very concerned about economic issues. It's band-aids here that often will make the situation worse than actually fix the real issue. So we're slapping band-aids on a gaping wound here and hoping that will help. So you have a lot of voter frustration over housing, and you have certain affordable housing units subsidized by the federal government, and then they also have a $5,000 tax credit. So they have all kinds of little things that they propose to help, but none of these have really addressed the core issues and the underlying reasons behind it. And he's claiming that we will build 2 million new units. And just another comment, one of the huge issues here driving housing costs is immigration. We have net immigration. We don't know how many, but roughly about a million or more, probably close to 1.5 to 2 million people every single year across the southern border. If we build 2 million houses in 2 years, but we're letting over 1 million people into our country every single year, how is that going to solve anything? First of all, whenever the government throws out numbers like this, take it with a grain of salt. Pie in the sky numbers have been put out before, but again, like the classic examples, the number of chargers that they built. I think the last time I saw it, the number was up to 8 after billions of dollars being put out to build new chargers. So I'm going to take a little bit of a funny break here. We're going to jump to a short video about rent control.
Meet Jessica. Jessica works at a local tech company. She likes her job, but she's always felt like she could do more. So she was very excited when she got a job offer from a tech startup in the big city. But there was one really big problem. Even with the higher salary they offered, there was no way she could afford to pay rent in the big city.
This is unfair. Greedy landlords are exploiting vulnerable renters with high prices. It should be illegal to charge this much.
This is a common demand people make, and on the surface it sounds like a good idea.
Because it is one?
Not exactly.
How'd I know that was coming?
The price of anything depends heavily on supply and demand. The reason rent is so high in most big cities is because a lot of people want to live there, but there isn't enough housing, so that means what is available is pretty expensive.
You're telling me.
Normally, when the price of something, like rent, is very high, it's a signal that there's money to be made providing that thing to others. So entrepreneurs start making more of that thing so they can make money. And the more people are making a thing, the more the price for it decreases, as the suppliers start competing with each other. But rent control ruins that.
Ruin? How could rent control ruin that?
Government already makes creating housing way more expensive than it needs to be through regulatory burdens. But when the owners can charge whatever rent seems fair to them, there's at least a chance for them to make back the money they invested and hopefully earn a profit. But when the government puts a cap on the price of housing, it becomes almost impossible to earn a profit off of it. So yeah, the very few people who manage to get rent-controlled places to live are happy with their below-market price housing. But it ultimately makes rent more expensive for everyone else, like Jessica here. Because builders know that the juice just isn't worth the squeeze. So the supply stays low, the demand stays high, and prices just keep going up.
I guess that makes sense, but if government makes all these rules that cause the price of living to get so high, why don't they just stop?
Why indeed? Hey guys, thank you so much.
So, if you've ever lived in New York is a classic example of where there were rent controls. And what happened? Construction stopped. Berkeley, California. I mean, this rent control has been tried all across the country. The same results every time. And I know people that have rent control in New York, and it's wonderful, and they love it. They love it so much that they won't leave. So people try to pass it down so that not only can they stay there as long as possible, sometimes they stay well past where they want to be. I mean, they don't want to be there, but they can't afford to live anywhere else. So why would they ever leave? And they try to pass it on to their children and keep it in the family because it's such a valuable asset to have an apartment in New York that is rent controlled. There's also a lot of corruption that goes with these things. So again, we've had famous politicians, connected actors, actresses. There's plenty of money that actually got rent-controlled apartments in New York City. Go figure. So again, there's a lot of abuse of the system that goes with rent control as well. So next article really goes into why is this so high? Does this make sense? So let me go back to sharing, and this is from and this is why rent control always leads to higher rent for the majority of people. It just talks about basic economics of tens of millions of people want a Lamborghini. Sure, I'll take one. But there's only a limited number produced, like most high-end vehicles, that keeps demand high and supply low. So a lot of people want the same thing, and then the cost is going to be high. Makes sense, right? On the other hand, there's no market at all for a jar of ordinary dirt. Anybody can just take a jar and put it. So why would you buy for it when the supply is limitless? So if the demand is low, why would they buy a jar of dirt? Supply is high, costs will be essentially nothing. So we get this when there's a glut of, whenever you see this whenever there's a sale on fruit, when it's in season. The price drops because all of a sudden there's all this fruit available, and they want people to buy it and buy it quickly before it goes bad. Huge supply because it's in season. And so the price goes down, encouraging people to buy it and buy it quickly. We see it every single day or regularly throughout the market. When there's a chicken cold or bird flu or something, and a lot of chickens have to be killed as a result, price of eggs goes up. Fewer chickens laying fewer eggs, all of a sudden, the price of eggs goes up. Again, we don't have the details, but this is the link to the Washington Post article that I talked about before. This kind of goes through it. So rent control. This is not a new idea. This has been bounced around for a long time. And here's Milton Friedman, one of the conservative economists, but says economists may not know much, but we know one thing very well: how to produce surpluses and shortages. Do you want to have a surplus? Have the government legislate a minimum price that is above the price that would otherwise prevail. So if the price for eggs is right now $2 a dozen. I know sometimes it's $3, $4, but let's just stick with $2. If the government says, hey, the price has to be $3, are people going to pay $3 versus $2? No. They'll use something else. They'll stop eating eggs as much. They'll go, so all of a sudden it creates a surplus of eggs. This is exactly what happens with surpluses of wheat, sugar, butter. They artificially fix the price to help support farmers, but that creates surpluses. So what do we do with most of that? We export it to the world. We use it in all kinds of, for bread, all kinds of other items that aren't controlled by the government, but that's happens on a regular basis. Our economy has adjusted to it. Is it healthy in the long term? No. But the other ways, you want a shortage, have the government legislate a maximum price, the most someone can charge, that's below that. So for example, for rental housing, if the going market rate is $3,000 for a rental unit and the government fixes it at $2,000, and you take that $1,000 profit or whatever gross profit away from whoever's renting it, you're going to get a lot fewer rentals. People that have been there, that have already paid off their mortgages, they can still make some money off of it. But anybody going in and investing in property right now, it is expensive. And all those prices are passed on. So again, they're talking about this 5%. If you just increase it to 5%, why would that create a shortage? Because the costs have been going up much more than 5%. And there are plenty of alternatives. People have liquidity, they have assets to invest. Their goal is at least maintain and not lose money. So not to lose your money, but to make your money work for you as much as possible. Everybody that has 401ks watches the market today because they want to make sure they're doing well, that their investments are producing. You can go into stocks, bonds, crypto, rentals, paintings, jewelry, loans, business franchises. The number of things you can invest in is long. Rental housing already has a lot of disadvantages. It's hard to liquidate your investment. You have insurance, taxes to pay on it every single year. And then you have all these surprise expenses, a leaky roof, a new HVAC system. And right now he's replacing a wall in his bedroom, and then none of it is cheap, and the cost for everything has gone up. You have to deal with squatters. Again, a huge problem, and for homeowners, but also renters. It's a huge problem for renters. You have to sue them and get them out. People are looking to just sue you for an easy buck, tie up in court, and get a few months of free rent. So these are all problems, and the harder you make for landlords, the less likely they are going to want to deal with this mess. So again, you always get trade-offs. There's no free lunch. So nationwide, the average premium rate for owner-occupied and homeowners insurance was 11.3%. So the homeowners policies went up dramatically. We're seeing that in car insurance, other areas. The 3 states with the highest rates were Texas, Arizona, and Utah. So if you slap a one-size-fits-all thing, you can only raise 5% across the whole country. There's no, costs shoot up like crazy in certain states. What are they going to do? They're going to sell their rental units, get out of their market if they can't make a living off it. They can't lose money on it. And there are people that do, but overall, you can't. And so the average property tax bill went up 4.1%. Indiana increased 18.1%. Kansas City, Missouri went up 16.8%. So again, you have owner increases on average went up 8.5%. So we have a break and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Just want to wrap this article up. The main point here, talking about the three major pieces here affecting the costs of that landlords are facing. Insurance has gone up roughly 10% across the country. Property taxes up 4.1%. And much higher in many areas of the country. And then there's home repairs going up 8.5%. So when cost inflation are causing actual costs to go up quite a bit, they're going to be losing money. So essentially, the interpretation of that is that we want you to be a charity, we want you to eat these costs and lose money so your tenants can have cheaper rents. Whenever government forces this to happen, there's two things that happen. So first, they're going to look for ways to get around this, and people are good at getting around legislation, and fewer people are going to rent units. Why would you invest in rental properties when the government's coming after you? So you can turn it into an Airbnb. You can turn it into office space, timeshare condos. There's plenty of other options than just jumping into the normal rental market. This is kind of interesting statement. But what we do know is that most landlords are not going to just happily lose money so Joe Biden will have something to brag about on the campaign trail. Whenever you do something like this, you help out some people. And if it looks like you're helping out the little guys, but hosing the people with money, it never turns out well. So second thing, people that own units are probably going to get rid of units and change because they're going to be disincentivized from renting houses. And it's not going to reduce the cost of anything. It's just going to reduce the rate of increase of how much housing will increase. So the effect is minimum, but the damage it can cause can be much bigger. Why would you, if you know the government is coming out and they're starting rent control, it's probably going to get worse with time. And so, again, this line is priceless here. It says, this only applies to existing inventory, not new apartments. But people aren't stupid. If nationwide rent control becomes reality, it's only a matter of time until new buildings are impacted by it as well. So whenever you create uncertainty in the market, you get less of it. When people can't plan, they don't know what's going to happen. And some of the best parts of these articles are towards the end. And most people don't read to the end of the article. So this is what we've seen time and time again in Berkeley and other places that have done rent controls. It's hurt people. So I've got another video we're going to share. And this is John Stossel. And he does it in kind of a funny way. But this is a little bit of a longer video, but I think really hits home.
Rents rose a record 11% last year. Activists want to fix that, so both Minneapolis and St. Paul voted for, and St. Paul voted for
the most stringent measure in the country.
This is meant to curb extractive rent increases, unfair profiteering.
It's predatory practice.
Those are powerful words. But what do the words mean? Profiteering? Profits are what persuade people to build things. When profits are high, other builders rush in to grab those profits. Soon there'll be more housing, and that will lower rents. That's just how markets work.
If we have less supply, prices go up.
Cecil Smith of Minnesota's Multi-Housing Association.
We need more supply. We need more housing.
But studies show rent control reduces the supply of rental housing. Activists don't want to hear that.
We don't need more studies. We don't need to collect more data. We need action now.
St. Paul's actions were uniquely strict.
Many cities exempt new construction. St. Paul's ordinance would not.
It's the most draconian rent control that anybody's ever imagined.
This is such a step backwards.
Mercatus Center economist Celine Firth studies housing.
What St. Paul is doing is actually going to hurt renters because they're going to have fewer choices. The market's going to shrink and quality is going to fall.
St. Paul's mayor voted for rent control, but now has second thoughts.
Turning off our supply of new housing would be disastrous for us as a community.
The mayor voted for it, but now he says, wait a second, we shouldn't apply this to new housing.
Yeah, because he knows that it's just absolutely going to shut down construction. Every rent control ordinance that even lefties have supported has had an exemption for new construction because everybody understood that if you applied this to new construction, you would completely shut it down.
Lenders are going to have to look long and hard about financing a project coming up.
If you don't already have a building, why would you enter a market where it seems like the government is actively trying to hurt you? You're providing an essential service, something that human beings need to live. And if the government there is viewing you as a hostile outsider, I wouldn't want to bring any service into a market like that.
In St. Paul, they can just move a few blocks over to St. Paul's Twin City. Although Minneapolis also voted to allow rent control, they've been wary about imposing it.
There'd be a final report by the end of this year so voters could weigh in next year's election.
It matters that we take action now.
The city council members frustrated that Minneapolis hasn't yet adopted St. Paul's strict rules.
We'd be fighting for a 3% cap with all of you.
I want us to follow their lead.
She's the only Minnesota rent control promoter who'd talked to me. If you're a builder, why would you build in a place where you can't raise the rent more than 3%, which is less than inflation?
If you're a person who lives in this city and you can't stay here anymore, then we don't have a city anymore.
But the way you have a city is if people build apartments and houses, and that's what eventually brings the price down.
In other cities, we have continued to see the development of property continue to happen.
What cities?
In San Francisco, there's continued to be development.
San Francisco? That's a bad example of new development. Builders still build in Minneapolis. Building permits were up 65% last winter. But in St. Paul, they're down 60% because of rent control. You're not going to get more apartments by pushing this. This pause is one of those rare interview moments where silence reveals so much.
I mean,
don't elected officials research issues before imposing government force on others?
I'm going to maintain that guaranteeing housing for people and making sure that they can stay in their homes matters more than anything else does.
You're a socialist.
Yeah.
Where has that ever worked? Again, the pause says it.
I'm doing a just fine job of representing my community.
Rent control is an appropriate tool nationally.
Nationally, socialists believe in rent control too.
Tell landlords that they cannot simply jack up their rents to any rate that they want.
But landlords can't just jack up rents.
They don't set the price. The market as a whole sets the price. The conditions of how many housing units are there, how many people are looking for housing, that's a market. You can't just magic away the fact that more people want to live in your city than you've provided homes for.
That's not the popular answer. Progressives everywhere push for rent control. People don't learn.
I live in the only town in Maryland that has rent control. We've had it since the 70s. We have not built a single multifamily building since that law was passed.
The late economist Walter Williams once told me,
short of aerial bombardment, the best way to destroy a city is through rent controls.
Rent control once destroyed much of New York City because landlords couldn't make money. Some started fires for insurance, and then, and even before the fires, they stopped doing maintenance.
We don't have water. We have to go outside to get the water because the landlord doesn't want to do anything in the building.
The buildings were awful. They didn't run hot water pipes.
Landlords just don't reinvest. They don't take care of their properties. They don't send a plumber promptly when water starts leaking.
Today, rents are up, and that's hard. But in the long run, rent controls will only make the problem worse.
What we need to do is build more houses. That is the solution to rising housing costs.
Hope you'll.
So that was a little bit longer video there. I do think it's very eye-opening. People need to be informed, need to be educated, and the problem is when we just push ideas that sound good to the masses, it can really hurt in the long run. The IRS and the government is not recognizing true inflation costs that people are facing every single day, and I have voiced a lot of frustration about this. Prior to the Biden administration, they had a 150% rule that if you were within 150% of the allowables, they would still give you credit for it because they knew the allowables weren't keeping up with actual costs. The Biden administration got rid of that rule because they know rent's going up. This is why he's talking about rent control. But when it comes with dealing with the government, the very government that's claiming that we need rent control, that rents are too high, they won't recognize how far rents have actually gone up in the country. It's like good is bad, up is down. It makes no sense. When it's in their favor, they have very strict controls at how much rent is appropriate and will be accepted across the country. In some of the major metropolitan areas, yes, the numbers are pretty high, but throughout most of the rest of the country, they're woefully insufficient. People are paying much more, usually $1,000 to $1,500 more than what the allowables are, and that's what we see in most cases. So to see the government come out and say, well, we need rent control because rents are too high. Yeah, a little bit hypocritical here. So that's one of the big things that people face when dealing with this. I have one article I want to close with, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I think it's the whole idea of rent control and limiting this. They're going to take away tax breaks. They're going to disincentivize renting. But how are they going to build more houses? Throwing more government money at the problem. And this is something that we see all across the world. And Kenya, was it Kenya that had all the riots lately? The previous government overspent like crazy. They were way over their head in debt, and now they're trying to address that, and people are rioting in the streets because, again, they don't care about indebting future generations. They just want their gimmies now. And too often that politicians play directly into that. They pump up those ideas. So the IMF, head of the International Monetary Fund, issued a warning about a jump in upside risks to inflation, saying there's still a lot of inflation risks out there, and it's exacerbated by too much government spending. And he focuses a lot on the United States, especially the U.S. Central Bank. So he's saying, well, and he kind of waffles back and forth, but he says, don't hold interest rates too high for too long. You just need to lower them when the time is right. But he's warning against cutting interest rates too soon. And the biggest reason driving inflation, driving the weakening of the dollar, really is right there. Too much government spending. And I hate to say it, neither party is serious about this. It's something I kind of beat like a bongo drum. So inflation has come down without a recession, but that's based on the government's official numbers. But there's a lot of concerns here as it goes through the article. Inflation is still up. It's just not as bad as it used to be last year, or per the official numbers. But unemployment has gone up. And one of the big issues here is that unemployment has been propped up. 3/4 of the employment numbers are from government and healthcare services. So primarily led by government. So this takes you directly to article about that. You have to actually subscribe to see that article. But again, when it's government hiring, it's not health in the economy. It's more government money being thrown at problems doesn't solve anything, and it actually makes it harder for average citizens to survive and thrive moving forward. So again, if just the idea of national rent control is going to throw jitters throughout the rental market. And it's one of these classic examples where let's attack the rich. It's class warfare, essentially. The landlords are evil, they're jacking up rents. A lot of times they're just trying to make sure they don't lose money, because guess what happens when they lose money? Foreclosures, or they have to sell property to investors, etc. But again, it just makes things too high. So instead of actually controlling the number of people coming into the country, that's probably one of the biggest factors driving the demand for housing, to doing something to increase the supply of goods and materials and get trained, skilled labor into the housing market. We're not doing any of that. All we're doing is throwing more money, incentives, buying houses, and that's competing for the construction that's already going on. So get informed, find out about how these different proposals can actually hurt your bottom line budget and your future for you and your kids. And thank you for watching. Hopefully this was informative.